Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. He's a retired federal agent who handled high-profile investigations that included outlaw motorcycle gangs, organized crime, and murder for hire. He was an undercover operative with the ATF for 26 years, an instructor for law enforcement officers, and an author of the Amazon highly rated book, Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. He took over 1,000 crime guns and millions of dollars in illegal drugs off the streets while sending 350 violent criminals to prison. Please welcome to the show, Lou Valoze. Lou, welcome to Before the Lights.
Tommy, thank you, man. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I am excited to get going, and let's just go here. Lafayette College, you're on a football scholarship while majoring in business and economics. You've admittedly said you weren't the greatest of students. My question is, what did the life of football teach you that you took to undercover work?
Definitely the team concept, because anyone you interview from my profession will tell you that you don't do it by yourself. Even if you are by yourself in a deep infiltration, long-term deep infiltration, you're not by yourself. You have a team. You need a whole supporting cast, and you need to rely on other people. And, football was a great teacher of that team concept because no one's doing it by themselves out there on the field. Brady's not doing it by himself. No. So football was super valuable. And I have found that a lot of the guys I work with were, former football or other team sport players, and it helped in our profession.
You had a bank job in New York reading computer printouts that you really didn't care for, but reflecting on that today, Lou, did that teach you anything that you were able to take forward?
Tommy, I just took a job at a bank, and it was like $8 or $9 an hour because I had a business and economics degree, and I figured that was the logical step. And it was actually a job you didn't even need a degree for. It was so entry level. And it really, to be honest with you, it taught me that I wasn't cut out for that kind of work. That's exactly what it taught me. It taught me how miserable I would have been had I stayed in that, business world. It wasn't me. I would have been miserable. What
was your aha moment to get you into the field that you end up going into?
It was a chance meeting. A guy I played ball with, he was in the Bronx, and he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm at my brother's house. Come over and have some beers." So I drove down there and never met his brother before. And this guy gets out of a Corvette, and he's got the long hair, and he's an Italian guy. He's got the whole Miami Vice get up. This is a long time ago. This 32 years ago. And he was an undercover agent with the DEA. We sat down, we had a beer. He told me about what he did for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And brother, I was hooked. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life at that point. That was my aha moment.
What did you learn from Warren Berkowitz?
So Warren was this crazy private investigator from Long Island, and kind of a Serpico wannabe kind of guy. But he really did teach me, and I was working under his investigator license, doing things like I had to go to bars and watch the bartender to see if they were skimming off the top. People who were doing workers' comp fraud. It was that kind of stuff. And he taught me how to be thorough. He taught me the importance of writing a good report. And it's funny, but you could be the greatest undercover agent in the world, but if you don't write a good report, a good thorough report, it's all for nothing. If you can't put action to paper, it's all for nothing. And he taught me the basic investigator skills and how to get them onto paper.
Listeners, go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link to the Amazon site where you can get your hands on Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. It's a quick, easy read. It's less than 200 pages. And before you know it, you're going to be done with it. It is a fantastic read. I'm not going to give it all away, but we're going to go over some of it. Lou, what was your training life like, and what were those days like for you?
So I was with three federal agencies. I have been a basic student at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center for over a year of my life between the three agencies. I've had a lot of training. The first half of all the agencies, I didn't have to do it for ATF because I'd already gone through it twice, is basically the same basic criminal investigator school where you're learning constitutional law and the basics, basic tactics, basic constitutional law, which is kind of a generic 2-month program before you go off into your agency specific portion. Then I was thrown right into the immigration portion, which, immigration law is terribly complex and convoluted. I would say second only to tax law, the IRS guys, it is incredibly difficult. So, but I enjoyed it. I found it interesting. And when they turned me loose on the streets, I had that, because I had paid attention, I had that deep, unlike college, I had a deep knowledge, which helped me when I got on the streets because I was confident in myself because I had paid attention at the academy and I knew the laws. Because if you find yourself out in the street, running and gunning, again, it doesn't matter. I don't care how great you are. If you don't know the laws that you're enforcing, the ins and outs, you're no good. So, I went through that with immigration. Then I went to the U.S. Marshals. And again, very basic. And their academy was, compared to ATF and INS, it was, a lot less, probably less challenging intellectually, executive protection, judicial protection, fugitive apprehension, that kind of stuff. But it was a lot more action, which was great and a lot more physical. But then when I got to ATF for my third time around at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, I knew I was where I wanted to be because we were going into the field op portion, which was undercover work, gun trafficking, all that. And again, I just loved it. I loved where I was. I loved being in the academy. And I took all that knowledge out to the streets with me.
Undercover work's about befriend and betrayal. And you're going to take one's freedom. Do you ever get used to that? Or do you just kind of go, this is my job and you're breaking the law. So I'm going to take you down.
Tommy, I was never totally comfortable with it. And I was never one of those guys. And there were guys who love that burn moment, that moment at the end when the bad guy finds out who you really are and that, he's going to prison for a long time. I dreaded that moment. That was just my personality. I didn't want to be around, and I would not be around if possible for that moment because, it's after a while you're developing a relationship and, everything you're telling this person is a lie, everything. You're meeting their family, you're meeting their friends, and you're building a relationship. You have to. And I don't care how bad they are, or what they're doing. You're going to see a good part of them, right? Because everyone has a good, good father, whatever, good friend, whatever the trait may be. And then you're going to unravel that. You're going to pull that thread and unravel the whole thing at the end. And that is the ultimate betrayal. And because of your actions, they are going to be deprived of their freedom for a long time. So there's a humanity to this. To undercover work. And, if you don't feel that, there's something wrong with you. At least that's what my shrink told me. If you don't feel some kind of regret, you're not human. And I can just tell you a quick story. I went to Chicago to do actually a mafia infiltration combined with a biker infiltration. This guy was a patch member of the Outlaws motorcycle gang. And he was also a member of the mafia in Chicago, they call it the Outfit. Mm-hmm. And, I was up there with him for a year and we became very close. And this guy, he had already sniffed out three informants the FBI had sent to him. And two of them were they were dirty cops and they were childhood friends of his. He was a super smart guy. He was not a convicted felon. They could not catch this guy. So after a year of spending a lot of time with this guy, they asked me to bring him to a hotel room where he thought he was meeting this MMA guy named Hoist Gracie, and when in fact he was meeting ATF and FBI agents who had put all the evidence in this hotel room, boxes and boxes of evidence against him to get him to flip. And I knew this guy wasn't going to flip. And I had to be there for that moment of betrayal. And when he wouldn't believe that I was who they told him I was, they asked me to walk into the room and show him my badge, which I did not want to do. I did not want to face him. But I did it. I walked in there. I showed him my badge, told him my real name. And I said to him, listen, I was just doing my job. It's not personal. And he looked at me. He goes, really? He goes, you're going to tell me it wasn't personal? He said, you met my kid. You spent time with my family. I let you in my circle. And you're going to tell me that this isn't personal? And I had no response. I had no response for that.
You took so many guns off the streets. How did you learn or become an expert on guns?
So and it's funny because when I first went into the academy, I was 22 years old and I had never even held a gun in my life. And I knew nothing about guns. But going through my first 7 years with the other two agencies, I started to learn about guns and get an appreciation for them, using them. As an ATF agent, you shoot almost every gun made. So you become very familiar with them. And to learn how to buy them undercover is a whole different thing. And you don't have to be an expert in guns, to buy them on the street, because most gun traffickers and guys on the street are not gun experts. But the art of buying guns undercover is totally different than buying drugs. And I always say anyone can buy drugs, man. I can take a uniformed cop and get him to buy. I can have him buying a kilo of dope within a day or two. Buying drugs is easy. Buying guns is difficult. It's just a whole different scene. And bad guys don't want to give up their own guns. That's for sure. So I through my first partner, I started learning, by doing just nickel and dime one gun deals. I would meet a convicted felon in an alleyway, a deal that had been set up by an informant, and buy a gun off of him. And that's how it started. And then I realized I had to have a hustle to buy guns. You have to have a hustle. And my hustle was that I bought guns down here in the South. I brought them up to New York to sell them at a huge profit, which is gun trafficking, which happens. So I created a whole scene around this hustle. I had moving trucks with people's furniture, and I would show them how I would secrete my guns in their furniture. I had hollowed out master cases of cigarettes where the whole bottom was empty, where I would, I could put 20 or 30 guns, and I would show these guys these things. And I would say, listen, this is how I get them from A to B. And, if I do get pulled over by Johnny Law and he's sniffing around, this is how I get out of it. And these guys wanted, the whole art of working undercover is wanting the bad guys to be a part of your hustle. And when these guys saw this, they were like, right on. And they wanted to become part of that hustle. And they wanted to start selling me guns. They were making money. They knew I was making money. Everyone was happy. That is the art of undercover work, especially buying guns, making the bad guys want to be a part of your hustle.
Of all the guns you saw, was there one that when it was presented to you, you went, whoa, okay, that one I'm not going to forget?
Yeah, it was a gold-plated Desert Eagle. We always trace these guns. That one, I believe, I don't think we were ever able to actually successfully trace. One of the few guns we weren't, but and it was just a thug who had it, So I was like, man, I wonder what the story is as far as how this gun got in this guy's hand. Every gun has a story, right? Every gun on the street can tell a story. And, how this guy ended up with this gun, who knows, what kind of violent crap had gone on and how many hands this gun had gone through to get into this guy's hands.
You were part of 4 storefront operations. First one was called Operation Ink in Augusta, Georgia, in a store called Color Time Tattoos that resulted in 400 guns, kilos of cocaine, tens of thousands of ecstasy pills, and 7 stolen vehicles, where 66 convicted federal total offenses and 90 arrested. To back up just a little bit, Lou, how long does it take to set up a storefront, and how are they established?
It is a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into a storefront because unlike almost everything else in law enforcement, you can't pull favors, right? You can't, almost anything else you do when we're doing an operation, we can call the local police, state police, other federal agencies. Hey, can you get this? Can you pull this license for us? Can you do this? You can't do that because of the secretive nature of these operations. You have to do everything from scratch in your undercover identity. And then I found out how hard it is to really operate a business because you have to you have to get your business license. First of all, you got to go out and find a place physically. You got to deal with realtors, credit checks and all that, all as Sal Nunziato, my undercover identity. Then, once you secure the location, you have to physically get the location tailored to whatever business you're going to do, tattoo shop, head shop, military surplus store, whatever it happens to be. And you got to get all the right licenses. You got to deal with the landlord. You got to deal with fire marshals, all the codes. So I did that as Sal Nunziato for all these businesses, and what a pain.
I'll bet.
Because I'm not only doing that, but I'm trying to, at the same time, initiate a long-term undercover operation. Now there's, ballistic Kevlar material we have to get installed on the countertops, the microphones and cameras everywhere, all that. So just a tremendous amount of work. Usually it was a couple of months between the time where we got approval for the operation to when we actually physically were in the building ready to rock and roll.
That's quicker than I thought. I was going to think you would say 6 months to a year. So that's pretty quick. In 2 months, you got that all done.
Hey, listen, we after the first one, and I always say this, ATF cannot take credit for that first one. That was the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, or the police in Augusta, were the main guys who set that operation up. ATF, we came in for the money and the undercovers. But once I saw that and kind of saw the success and how it could happen, that's when we really took that and we ran with it and we elevated our game. Every single storefront operation got bigger and better.
Operation Inc. You have several tattoos. Listeners, you have to read the book to find out who Little John is. But did you ever let Little John tattoo you?
I did.
You did?
I did, yeah, and it was bad. You can't really tell what they are. A couple of symbols that were my kids, the first initials of my kids' names. And when I showed my wife, it's supposed to be like Old English, and she had no idea what it was. She said, I don't know what it is. Alien symbols. Yeah.
How important was street theater to your success? And can you explain to my listeners what that is?
Street theater, I used it in every single storefront operation that I conducted. And all the operations that I participated in all over the country, we use street theater. And I take no credit. I did not invent street theater. It was invented by guys who were, running long before me. But ATF perfected street theater. Street theater occurred when we would, and I know you've had Jay on your show, Dobbins, and he was a major player in a lot of street theater operations. Street theater is when we would bring in other undercover agents from other parts of the country to conduct an undercover transaction amongst us between myself and other undercovers and ATF agents from other parts of the country in front of bad guys. And the reason for that was credibility. All right. Although we did end up charging a lot of them as a result of these, it was for credibility. So I might set up a 10-kilo drug deal and tell the bad guys that I'm dealing with, hey, I got some bikers coming into town. They're buying 10 keys or they're buying 20 machine guns. I don't know them. I don't trust bikers. I don't want them coming in here thinking, they're going to get one over on me. I want to show up strong. And so they know they're dealing with someone serious. Would you guys want to post up security for me? I'll pay you. And, every time they'd be like, that's what we do. And, I would never tell them to show up armed, but they always would. So we would set it all up. We would tell them when and where, when to be there, the whole deal. And I mean, it was incredible because the tension before one of a street theater deal, which was a fake deal, was often higher than the tension in a real undercover deal. Because the wild card was these guys, like, because they were all itching to do something, right? And I would have to say, hey, guys, listen, don't do shit unless I do shit. Don't do anything. Just stand there. It's the easiest money you'll ever make, and they'd all be standing there just ready. So we would all make it very theatrical, and these guys would roll in the parking lot in a panel van, and jump out and come in, and the big bad Hell's Angels looking dudes, but they were actually ATF undercover agents. And we would get 10 real kilos from evidence. And, we'd even let these guys fist fuck the kilos and hold them and look at them. And then we would conduct the transaction in front of them, and my guys would be mean mugging the bikers, and there'd be a little bit of interaction there. And I'd always be like, hey, listen, this is about the money. And, this is kind of dirty pool, but if it was a drug transaction, if these guys showed up armed, that is a crime. To bring a gun to a drug transaction is a federal crime, and they would be charged with that. It doesn't matter that it was a fake transaction. It was real drugs. So, and that would tack on an extra 5 years to whatever sentence we were getting anyway. And then inevitably, usually after the transaction, I would try and buy all their guns from them that they brought anyway. And usually they would end up selling them because their juices were flowing and they were seeing money being exchanged. And when we did that and we would use real money, I would always make sure that one of my guys would get the money out of there right away. I tell them, bring it to the spot, because I didn't want these guys knowing I was holding that much cash, because the same guys who I hired, for my protection would come right back and rob me.
Right.
If they knew I was holding that kind of money. There's no honor among thieves, right? So that is what street theater is. Street theater is essentially doing a fake undercover transaction in front of real bad guys for street cred. And it always worked beautifully.
Your next operation was Statesboro Blues. It earned more national awards and recognition than the others. It won a Gold Award and the 2021 Spotlight Short Film Awards. The store was called Smokin' Sal's 2. And at the end, more than 550 undercover transactions, over 200 illegal guns, and a big number of narcotics. Folks, again, read the book. What I want to talk about is, I got to tell you, this gave me a huge smile. When you presented bad guys with information cards for televisions, they filled it out and gave you all kinds of information that you didn't even have.
Well, Tommy, we found that we were starting to have trouble identifying some of these guys. They would come into the store, they'd be dropped off by some girl. And I say guys, but we had female defendants as well. But, they'd be dropped off by a girl. The tag of the car she was driving wouldn't even come back to her. It would come back to someone else. This guy's giving us his street name. And, he's selling us guns or he's selling us dope, and we don't really know who he is. And, you don't want to be conducting vehicle stops when they leave, right? Because that's going to give up the operation. So we had to get creative, because in order to charge this guy, especially charge him with being a convicted felon in possession of a gun, well, how do you know he's a convicted felon if you haven't identified? So we had to identify these guys and we had to get creative. So we started using giveaways, because we found that some of these guys, these bad guys, they would never give you their real phone number or their real name, because they still weren't, even though they were doing, they were selling you dope or selling you guns, still weren't 100% trusting. But if you promised them, if you gave them something free or the promise of something free, they would give you real information. So we started giving away flat screen televisions, cell phones. And what they would do is they would come in, a guy would come in, he'd sell me a sawed-off shotgun. And I'd say, we'd have a big box on the counter right next to where we did the deal. Fill out this little info sheet. We're giving away a TV on Friday, a 50-inch flat screen Samsung. And I'd say, listen, hey man, fill that out. I say, fill it out. And I said, just put a little crease in the corner. I said, and when I pull the winner, I'll make sure you win. And so always they would at least put a real phone number or whatever, however I could get a hold of them, a real email, a real name. And if all else failed, if they still didn't give me anything real, we could lift the latent prints off of the slip that he just filled out. And it worked beautifully, man. I don't think in all the storefronts, there was more than a handful of guys we weren't able to identify.
You had mentioned that this operation, of all of them that you completed, haunted you the most. And why is that?
Yeah, by far it was my favorite operation. And also the one I have the most regrets for. We made a mistake. We had a little bit of a slow start. So, and the bosses, even though they were always all behind you, 2-3 weeks go by and there's no evidence coming in. They're like, hey, put some food on the table. So we had a girl who was selling us some pills, and she told us that her boyfriend sold crack cocaine. So she goes, you guys interested? I said, yeah, if I can make money on it. I said, go ahead, send him in. We'll check him out. So she sent in her boyfriend. His name was Petey. And he was a pleasant guy. Came in, sold a pretty large amount of crack cocaine to us. And very pleasant to deal with, unlike the majority, these guys. And she came back to us and she said, you guys remember Petey? I said, yeah, absolutely. She said, well, he's on parole, and part of a condition of his parole is that he needs to be employed. Could he work here? And we were like, wow, there's an opportunity right there, right? I mean, he was known in the community. Obviously, he'd been in and out of prison. We're like, wow, instant credibility if he's behind the counter. Obvious problem. This is an undercover operation. Cover team is right behind the wall where the counter is. We can never come out of roll in between if this guy's here. But because of the slow start and the opportunity, we were like, let's give it a shot. We said, send him in, we'll give him a shot. And he ended up working for us for the duration of the operation. And, where the regret comes in, first of all, it was a bad move, because to hire a future defendant just turned out to be a bad move. And we all got really attached to this guy. He was just a good guy, and I say that about, he's a convicted felon. He sold drugs. He's very likable. We had deep talks with him. We all liked him. I wasn't alone here. The 3 other undercover guys, even the guys in the cover room were like, man, Petey's a good dude. He's funny. He's nice. He ended up helping us so much during the operation. He unwittingly would identify guys for us. Guy would come in, do a deal with us, giving us some street name. He'd leave. Petey would go, man, that ain't his name. That's so-and-so. He lives over there on whatever street. We're like, well, thanks. He ended up negotiating for us. He saw what was going on. He was cool with it. Guys would come in, guys he knew, and, wanting some ridiculous price on some stolen gun. And Petey would pull him aside and help negotiate price for us. He became as useful as another undercover agent. And we all became attached to him, and we all liked him. And, toward the end of the operation, we all started looking at each other and going, wow, we're all going home at the end of this operation. Petey's he's going to prison for 20 years. And, it was a bad feeling.
Moving forward to Operation Pulaski, which landed 45 high-level federal defendants, time when a security officer from the U.S. Marshal Office almost blew your cover. Obviously, that didn't sit well with you, but how did you rectify that, and how did you get past that?
Again, Tommy, that was another mistake I made. I broke the golden rule. Our golden rule was we never leave the storefront. Never do a deal outside of the storefront, no matter how enticing it is, because bad things happen. Especially when you're doing a storefront in the town you live in, the city you live in, which I was. And I broke that. It was some guys we really wanted. They were running a car wash, which was just a front for a huge dope dealing operation. And I had a guy coming in from out of town, another undercover, and He was dropping off his $120,000 Mercedes truck, for a car wash over there. And so I made an appearance with him over there to meet the main bad guy, the owner of the car wash. And there was this older guy looking at me, and I didn't recognize him, because he was in street clothes and I hadn't seen him in a while. And the undercover from out of town goes, after we got in the car, he's like, "Did you catch that?" He goes, "That guy looking at me." I said, yeah. And then by the time it hit me who he was, my informant was calling me saying, "Hey, the guy's name was Fee. This Fee just got word that you're an ATF agent." And so this guy had blown everything up. I don't know what his motivation was to tell him who I really was, but I tell you, I don't think I've been that mad ever in my life. And we called him in. We called him into the office, and my boss was like, "Listen, I'm holding you back, pulling the reins," and but I couldn't help myself. I mean, I teed off on this guy. My boss did. We were able to overcome it, with just a show of force. And keep the undercover operation going. I went over there demanding that the owner call this guy back up, and I really was going to kick his ass if he showed up. And so we tightened this guy's belt as much as we could, and my boss really got into him, and we got over that. But you learn these valuable lessons. I made a lot of mistakes. That was a huge mistake. And I could never really get over the fact that this guy, there was just no reason for him to tell. He knew I worked undercover. There was no reason for him to tell this guy who I was, unless he was scoring dope at that place.
The operation eventually moves to phase 2. How did Wally and Roberto take this operation to a whole new level?
Tommy, as we went along, right, we went from a tattoo shop, right, to a head shop, like a paraphernalia store, but we had upped our game with that. Then we went to a military surplus store with a shooting range attached to it. And we found that we were starting to get more into organizations, criminal organizations, not just the guy coming in off the street, and the quality was going up. So for that last operation that you're talking about with Wally and Roberto, we had become freight forwarders at the port. And we had this business was legitimate, man. We always said 90% of our business is 100% legitimate, right? I mean, we were actually shipping stuff to Colombia. We had a tobacco warehouse. We had a import-export business and a freight forwarding business. It was huge. It was massive. It was instant credibility when you walked in there. I mean, we had forklifts going. It was incredible. And because of that, and because of the cars we were driving Jaguars and Mercedes and all that, we encountered this guy, Wally, who just happened to be accompanying a Middle Eastern guy who was buying cigarettes from us. Started talking about cars. And he had a car to sell us, it turned out. And we found out it was stolen. But it wasn't just like a stolen car. We eventually found out that Wally and his partner Roberto, they were part of the biggest stolen car ring on the Eastern Seaboard. And the FBI was already working these guys up in New York, which was another great pleasure in my career that we were able to indict these guys and arrest them, right under the FBI's nose. And not only that, but they were smuggling guns to Bolivia. They were dealing, in hundreds and hundreds of kilos of cocaine. It was a huge organization. And, just from that little conversation about cars, we were able to get into one of their members. And then, we ended up dealing with probably 10 or 12 members of this organization. And we dismantled the entire organization through the storefront. So when you look at where we started, kind of, and I'm not putting it down, but nickel and dime stuff with the tattoo shop, going after street gangs, which was a very worthy cause, but to where we evolved and ended up as freight forwarders going after, Bolivian gun smugglers.
Listeners, get your hands on Storefront Sting, because each operation has a takedown, and each takedown is different. And I think it was very well planned out. I'm not going to get into the takedowns. I want you to get the book. It's a cliffhanger, people. Go get the book. Lou, what do you remember about your last day as an undercover agent?
My last day as an undercover agent was one of the worst days of my life. I was I believe I was in Cleveland, and I was actually working my way into an organized crime family up there in Cleveland on a Gideon operation, which were these operations where we saturated a city with undercovers and informants. And that's when I found out that I was under investigation along with my other undercover partners. And that's where my life kind of came crashing down. And, Sal Nunziato had been running and gunning for almost 2 decades. And he had kind of, taken over from Lou Valoze and who I was and my priorities. I lost my priorities. And, as a result of that, my career certainly didn't end in a storybook manner. While I was vindicated, it was still a really bad ending. I'm not unique in that. There's a lot of guys who do this for too long, probably like I did. And now we kind of run it right into the ground. We run our personal lives into the ground, which usually rolls over into your professional life.
Lou, can you speak about the ATF brotherhood and the respect that it really doesn't get, in my opinion?
I can tell you that the men and women that I worked with, the men and women of the ATF Enhanced Undercover Program, are the most unique group of people you could ever imagine. If you just saw everyone from over the years in a huge conference room, you would think it was just some convention of gangsters, an international convention of gangsters. Just some scary looking, just slimy criminal people. When in reality, it is some of the smartest, college educated, hardest working people, interesting people you will ever meet. With a lot of these men and women I work with, they were borderline genius. And I use this, Tommy, comparison all the time. I compare a lot of the men and women I work with to comedians, to famous comedians. And the reason why is the similarities in that, like, every great comedian, when you think about it, is a borderline genius, right? Robin Williams, Richard Pryor, like all these guys, men and women, are incredibly smart. You have to be, right? To come off the cuff and to ad lib and just come up with the stuff you come up with. And that's the same way with this group of undercovers. And also what goes along with that and that success is always tragedy. It seems like all these great comedians, man, things don't end up well for them, right? It seems like their personal life's just always full of trouble and problems and early death. And it's the same with, a lot of us, in the undercover program. But if you actually, spend time to get to know these people, you won't get to know most of them, right? Because unlike, Jay and I, who both of us, because of the way our careers ended, we've come out with books and all, most just fade off, right, into the sunset. But just amazing people, man, just smartest people, people who can handle themselves in any situation, people who you could drop off these people in any city, in any country on this planet, and they would find a way to not only survive, but to thrive. I guarantee it.
Do you miss your job?
I miss the clowns, but I don't miss the circus, man.
Okay.
I got out of law enforcement at about the right time, from what I've seen. And unfortunately, undercover work's not happening like it was. Storefront operations have been shut down. Long-term deep infiltrations like Jay and I did are not happening. So I miss what I did, and I miss that time and that era. But I'm glad I'm out. And I'm glad for my family that I'm at.
From speaking to yourself and Jay and a couple other guys that I've had on this show that have worked undercover, how addicting is that profession?
I mean, worse than any crack or meth that's out there. I could not stop once I started, once I got that taste. And to kind of go above and beyond the addiction was that healthy competition we all had with each other, right? So I would get word, hey man, Jay Dobbins just did a big case, locked up 40 guys, he got 80 guns. And I'd be like, man, I'd be proud, man, because, that's one of my guys, right, who did that. And I had pride in that. And in the same thought, I could do better than that, right? I can whip game like Jay, but I can one up. And then, that would motivate me to go out and do something, try and do something bigger and better. So not only was there the addiction, but there was that healthy competition that we had. I don't know if it was healthy, but it was a competition between each other to outdo each other. And, who got the shit end of that stick was the bad guys, man, because we were just locking them up.
In your book, as I'm reading it towards the end, there was a phrase that exploded off the page to me that was, stop borrowing trouble from your future. Lou, what does that mean to you, and why was it told to you?
That was told to me during my very darkest days by my psychiatrist when I was under investigation and my life was crumbling, my family life, everything, my family, my friends, my job, my reputation. And because of my personality, these type A personalities that we all are, and because of my need to be in control of these big investigations, I found myself in a place where I had no control, none. The OIG was investigating me in the last operation, and I had no control. There was nothing I could do. And all I could do was project and think, what's coming my way. Think about it. Everything, undercover work is a gray area, right? When you find out that they're looking into everything you've done in the last 10 years, your mind starts going crazy. It's a gray area, right? Mm-hmm. As Jay likes to say, unfortunately, we took the law very seriously working undercover, but we took ATF policy and procedure as suggestions, right? And that was for survival, right? For your own survival. So when I found myself, totally helpless and out of control, all I could do was borrow trouble from the future. This is what's going to happen. This is what's coming my way. And she just looked at me and said, listen, stop borrowing trouble from the future. Right now, as you're sitting here, nothing's wrong. You're safe. Your family's safe. You have a job. You're just borrowing trouble from the future. And I was in the red. I was revving at about 8,000 RPMs. I
got to tell you, that quote can be used in several different scenarios in several different people's lives. And like I said, when I read it, it exploded off the page to me. And I thought, what a powerful statement that was told to you that can be used in many different facets of life.
Yeah. She just helped me immensely get out of that funk I was in. And she turned out to be absolutely right. I was cleared of any wrongdoing, and it was an absolute witch hunt. But the most damage that was done to me, I did to myself during that period of time.
Thank you for your 26 years of service. Thank you for taking so many bad guys and bad things off the street, and your time, because time is valuable for me, and being on my show. This has been an honor.
Tommy, thank you for having me, brother. It's been a total pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Listeners, follow me on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast, and go to beforethelightspod.com and click the donate page, and you can buy me a glass of vino. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, you know the saying, a salute, a chin chin.